Hello, everybody. This is Mike Naraki, director of Pistachio.
And this is Joe Spatterford. I'm one of the concept artists on this. And as you can see, we're in a museum, an art gallery. So just click that right arrow and join us for a commentary. I got to make Junior as a carved out piece of wood that fell on the ground. And the key element was making the piece of wood big enough for Junior, but also making the shapes and the paint job on Junior. I wanted it to look like it was hand painted, so little bits and pieces of wood show through. So so we know it's Junior, but we also know that it's not like the vegetable Junior. You know, he's not a real vegetable yet.
And just to get the idea that too, I mean, I look back at like Wizard of Oz with Lunt as the scarecrow and Pa Grape as the lion. That idea that we could actually paint their surfaces and kind of get this texture on them, but still kind of definitely have the same flavor and the same movement of the original character. Yeah. And then it was fun. So he just has a nice wood feel, and even in sound effects, Adam Frick, who did the sound design for the show, with Pistachio's hops, they're a little more wooden sounding as he hops around. So it kind of just gives him that a little bit of that flavor, which is great.
Okay, so this time around, we actually wanted to go for a more conventional looking take on the Gelato character. And, one of my first drawings was just we want to keep our costumes simple, and we had first started added hair back on our characters way back when we actually did the...
that was Schoolhouse Polka.
Yeah, the Schoolhouse Polka. So that was the first time I actually drew a mop of hair on Larry, and everybody was just like, oh, that can work. So hey, if we're painting Junior, we might as well put a mop of hair on Larry again. And I actually added that little hammer on the side, which I never thought of originally, but we actually used it as a staging element for
Cricket. Yeah, so Khalil, it's a great place for Khalil to stand. So as he rides around with Gelato, let's call the whole thing off. As he rides around with Gelato, he just kind of hangs onto that mallet. So, but it's great because he just has a nice Italian sort of old world feel, and just a kindly father feel is what we were going for this character. So Joe did a great job pulling that off.
He's back!
Yay! It's our friend Khalil. So he plays the role of Cricket. Which, in the original book was an actual cricket, but, we don't have an actual veggie cricket, and we just thought it'd be really fun to take the character of Khalil. There's so many parallels between Pinocchio and Jonah that we thought it would really be, since we've already done Jonah, it'd be kind of fun to pull on those. And, one of those with, obviously there wasn't a cricket in Jonah, but the character of Khalil was in Jonah, so we wanted to pull him into Pinocchio, into Pistachio. And give him sort of an Italian, just sort of a 19th century Italian feel.
I know it's not really hard to make this guy look Italian. He's already got that beautiful mustache, and all you got to do is put that cool Italian cap on him, and voila,
there
instant
you go.
Italian.
So here are the ducks, and the ducks are really cool. We wanted to play off a parallel between the story of Pistachio and the parable of the lost sheep, and we needed to give Gelato some other children to attend. And Chuck Vollmer originally came up with the idea of, hey, what about ducks? I mean, Chuck actually had a couple of ducks out in his land. Chuck is also a concept artist on Pistachio. And he had a couple of pet ducks, which were super, super cute.
When I did the final design on it, I thought, well, what would be kind of cute is to kind of go back to VeggieTale roots and, King George and the Ducky. It was half based on one of Chuck's drawings, and then the other part of it, especially how I was handling the eyes and stuff like that, I wanted to kind of have a little throwback to what if one of those ducks actually walked around.
And here is the fox. Of course, this is one of the main bad guys in the regular story of Pinocchio. And, our Scallion characters are always sort of are good stand-in bad guys. And, using one of them as a fox is much easier than modeling a whole new fox. So, Joe just took a stab at designing him as the fox and the cat with two of our Scallion characters.
Yeah, one of the things that we've done a lot of times just to make our characters take on animal, like an animal look or something, is as if they went to a costume store and he has a strap like tied around his nose that makes it look like a fox's nose, and just the basic costume, and probably a tail that's probably attached by some tape or something like that behind him. So it just it's kind of a fun way of drawing a character, because all of our characters are essentially, they all know they're on stage.
Sure. So, we can take a real stage play feel to it. So, just put them in a costume. We don't have to really think that they're a real fox, but, hey, here's this Scallion dressed up like a fox playing this part, and it does great. And the fun thing about this, too, which is what the animators added a really nice touch to, they actually animated his tail.
Cool.
And it just has a really nice flow to it and overlap, and it just really adds to the characterization of him. So, initially we were thinking of it just as a straight costume, kind of static tail, but we were able to get a lot of acting out of it, which is really, really cool. These are Gelato's brothers. On the left we have Milano, in the middle is Espresso, on the right is Dorito, and these guys are just hilarious in the show. We wanted to, give just in the backstory of Gelato, kind of telling about where his brothers went when he was younger, and give him a reason to meet up with his brothers later in the whale. But Joe, you drew these three characters as his brothers, and it was just immediately oh yeah, we got to do that. We had brought Larry had introduced his three brothers to Bob in a previous episode, but they had been designed. We didn't have really any design budget for them, and they had been done really quickly, so they were basically just different versions of Larry. So it was really great to go back and just have that real character design with these guys. This is the color script for the show, and typically what we'll do is we'll take a scene from one scene in sequence throughout the whole film, and do a color key, which kind of you can look at it in a single page and sort of get the mood of the whole film, as you go from scene to scene. And this will help then give the lighting team direction in terms of what lighting and texturing as to how things should feel in each scene, and the direction of the light, and kind of the overall ambience and feel of the scene. And Chuck Vollmer, who's just amazing with color, just did a great job of putting out all these keys, and then what you see in the show is remarkably similar to this. It just really, really flowed across and came out in the final animation.
This is what we do sometimes on the show, because it's the magic of movie making. We can take a set that we've used before and turn it into something entirely different. Well, not completely different. These are both inventors, but
Blunders in Boo Booville, which was on Abe and the Amazing Promise. The inventor character that Larry played, kind of had his little, cottage, and we just thought that we wanted a similar feel for Gelato's workshop, and so Joe went in and redressed a set that we had already had, so we were able to just pull out elements that worked and add to it, and just saved ourselves a lot of work. And yeah, like Joe mentioned, we'll do that. A lot of times we'll just figure out, we'll go into our back a lot and say, hey, what can we reuse that's going to work great for the story, that'll save us some time and, work well in context. It was interesting going into this story, to read the script. The world feels really big. You have this Italian town, and then you have this waterfront carnival, and you have the ocean and the beach and the whale, the inside of the whale. And so we wanted to kind of really draw down the size of the world, and it's interesting, if you were to look at the computer file of this entire world, it's very, very small, and really? This whole thing takes place on this little Italian island, and so we've got this little street front outside of Gelato's shop, and you can walk down the street a little bit, and there's the museum, and there's really not a whole lot to it, but once you start kind of putting your cameras in and sort of tricking the eye and putting some background flats in, you get this nice feeling of a large village. But the buildings were fairly modular, and we only made a few and then sort of dressed them up differently.
Yeah. Chuck was really good about deciding which windows would be small, which windows would be big, which doors would go with which buildings, and mixing them up a lot. And in the same way that you design a character, you design a building, you design a house. And you keep certain things big and small just to give it a lot of character and charm.
And Gelato is a wood carver, a toy maker, and so Joe just populated his workshop with little toy animals, and I see some inspirations from other shows there.
Oh yeah, definitely. I wanted to do the Boo Bird,
the Boo Boo Bird, or
the Boo Boo Bird, yeah,
Boo Boo Bird,
the pig from Wizard of Oz, the chocolate bunny from Rack Shack and Benny, and obviously the Jonah whale.
Yep, and it looks
and Mike
like Reginald
has a carved Jonah whale that looks almost exactly like this, only it's all wood, and it's beautiful. It's
plaster. Yeah, it's the actual maquette that was made for the film itself. They actually, for the Jonah film, we actually made the whale in 3-dimensional plaster. One of our modelers did it that way before he built it on the computer, just to give himself a point of reference.
Brilliant. And then the camel was sort of
like Reginald from Jonah as well.
Sort of like Reginald. And then a giraffe, because he was easy. When I first heard about these puppet characters, I was like, well, how do you do a puppet in a VeggieTale world? And I immediately thought of just big floppy-headed characters that kind of reminded me of some old shows that I used to watch when I was a kid, where it was just like you just see their mouth open, and there was no like cheek or anything movement there. It was just there was clearly a hand right behind it, opening and closing, almost like glorified sock puppets. And I always loved these little Punch and Judy plays where you see them in a lot of old period cartoons, and where it's basically one guy chasing another guy, or the wife chasing the husband and hitting him with a little rolling pin or something on the head because he's done something silly. And I just wanted to do something that was that had that look to it, and these were actually one of my favorite things. I think when I finished designing these, I actually sat back and was like, I want one.
All right, here's the Rainbow of Fortune, which is the roller coaster game that Junior plays. It's sort of like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire meets a roller coaster. It's just this idea of it's just this lonely carnival. There's nobody else there except for Junior and the Scallions. They sort of bring him there to take his gold coins away from him. So it kind of has this fun feel, but yet lonely feel to it.
Yeah, kind of like those carnivals that come into your town every year, and you're a little afraid of the rides, but not because they're scary, but because you just hope they've screwed it on right. Like every bolt. But so it's got this kind of traveling carnival type feel.
Yeah, that's true. Like it could be torn down and set up at another seaside town along the way. But this is kind of a breakout of that set for detail, so the modelers can look at it closer and really get an idea of how to build it. Because, Joe will design something by hand and with pencil and paper, scan it into the computer and paint it, but then it's got to be modeled in 3D, and to do that you kind of have to have more of a schematic feel to it, so they can look at it and say, okay, this is the real three-dimensionality of this model.
Yeah, you got to almost build it like an architect. Even though these shows are shown on your TV, these characters are actually walking around on a little tiny stage, and everybody who works on the film, they have to light it like they would light a little stage, like if you went to a play, or build the sets, like if you were to watch a claymation show. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just done on the computer. Now, having worked at a theme park for about 5 years when I was going through college and my first year out, the first summer out, I really got familiar with the section of the theme parks where people are caught up in games of chance, and I've lost a pretty penny on trying to win a stuffed animal for somebody. So it was really kind of fun to just think of all the games that took my money. The odds of winning those bottle tosses, they're designed so that it's almost impossible to win it. That's why they have the biggest stuffed animals. But when I was 6 years old, young Joe Spataford threw a loop up in the air because my dad gave me one of them to throw, and I got it. I won this gigantic, I don't even know how we fit it in our car, this gigantic buffalo that was Buffy the Buffalo. And I tried riding him once, and all the styrofoam fell out.
So here's the inside of the whale as they discover the brothers' boat and them singing the meatball song. And, we talked about this wanting to kind of make allusions to Jonah as well. There's obviously, there's that parallel between the story of Jonah and Pinocchio and the whale. And, we kind of wanted to have a flashback to a little bit of our Jonah interior of the whale scene. But, in Jonah, we had a huge, choir of angels, and, it needed to be much bigger. So we wanted to kind of bring it down into kind of a more cozier feel here. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and for coming through the art gallery.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I hope you liked the film, and it was a great time working on it.
Calling all clever children!